Hi everybody, this is Nathaniel Rumpeljantz from ZeldaInformer.com, and I'm here today to talk about Skyward Sword. Why? Because it's been a while since we've actually talked about Skyward Sword. In fact, we haven't had a lot to even talk about, pretty much since the month after E3. So we had a really popular article at our website before Skyward Sword was announced called "What Do We Know About Zelda Wii?" The article was originally created in January and then re-released the week leading up to Skyward Sword with some updated details. And now it's kind of time to kind of get updated even further on what do we really know about this game. Especially for those people that missed a lot of the E3 hype. Like, what do we really know about Skyward Sword as it stands right now? So, for starters, we know that Skyward Sword is supposedly the first game on the timeline. Basically, this was confirmed at E3. I forget if it was Eiji Inoue or Shigeru Miyamoto. I think it was Miyamoto who said that this game takes place before Ocarina of Time and is the first. So what that means is that it's not restricted by any of the games before it. In terms of its storyline structure and all that stuff. It was even said before we knew the name of the game that the structure of Skyward Sword would be completely different from Twilight Princess in terms of the storyline progression. So we'll see what happens with that. So here's some more of the controversial things that we know. Number one, we know the graphic style is not going to be Twilight Princess like. That's pretty obvious from anybody who's at least seen just the trailer or seen even just a screenshot. It's impressionistic. A lot of people confuse the graphics with cell shading. While there are elements of cell shading in the graphics, just like there are elements of Twilight Princess models in the graphics, it's not really either or. It's not realistic and it's not cell shaded. Cell shading is a unique technique, and I'm not an expert in the art design world, so I can't go into all the nitty gritty details. But I know there is a thread on our forums that talks about how there was one member in there in particular that does game design and does graphic design, and he broke down into what cell shading really is and why Skyward Sword is not actually cell shaded. So it's not cell shaded. It's impressionistic art. As Miyamoto used himself. He says he really likes impressionistic art, and that is the style he wanted for Skyward Sword, was impressionistic, and that graphics were the last thing being worked on. That means that whatever we have already seen wasn't the polished version of it. There's probably going to be some differences made. There was already, it looked like the brightness of the game was already toned down just a couple months later when they released a new batch of screenshots. So it's definitely an ongoing process with the graphics. So let's set the graphics aside because who really, I mean, in the end, as long as the game looks good, the graphics aren't really going to matter. I think the Wind Waker proved that. As long as the game itself is good and the graphics don't look like crap, who really cares? So, what do we really know about Skyward Sword? Well, we know that Link is, and keep in mind that when this is all what we know, it's all going to be spoilers from this point on. So, if you don't want to know this stuff, or most of the stuff is pretty common knowledge by now, but there's some people who are holding back and might not want to know. So first off, Link is from a place called Skyloft. It is basically a land that exists in the clouds, kind of like the floating city in Twilight Princess, except this is the entire land, and there's several islands to this land apparently. That's where Link is from. He was born and raised there. He's never been to the supposed Hyrule land down below. That land is completely inhabited by evil, supposedly. Whether that's Ganondorf or whatever other forces, it's inhabited by evil. And the interesting twist to that, obviously discussion-wise, is if it is inhabited by evil and the people live up in Skyloft, and if Link goes down there and helps found what Hyrule is with the royal family and everything, is it an invasion? Are we just, I mean, is the land really inhabited by evil, or is that evil's land and we're just taking it? I mean, that's what happened with America. Europeans and stuff, they came over and they just took it from the Native Americans. So, is that what's happening here? I don't know. Um, the girl that we saw in the art, we still don't know her name, whether it's LOL, Zordiana, uh, Adele, Aduru, whatever other names you've seen running around. We don't know her name yet, but we do know that she is the Skyward Sword, or at least the spirit or essence of the Skyward Sword. And she is going to transform, because the Skyward Sword is going to transform into the Master Sword at some point during the game. So what this means is it's a Master Sword origin story. That's pretty exciting stuff when you think about it. We haven't really talked a lot about it since we found out at E3, but it can have a lot of crazy implications on the future of the timeline, and a lot of obviously really good story implications because the Master Sword has just kind of always been there, and no one really knew where it came from or why it even has power, and why only the hero, the hero of time or the hero wins or whatever, can wield it to its full potential, um, to seal away Ganondorf. And was sealing away Ganondorf even why it was created? It might have a completely different purpose that we're not aware of. So Skyward Sword's completely open on that front because this is a completely new realm of possibilities. And when Ocarina of Time came out, it was, oh, here's how Hyrule was created, here's the three goddesses, blah, blah, blah. But nowhere in that creation story did it say that all these good people were originated on Hyrule or lived on Hyrule. They might have lived up in the clouds. So it's really up, and it's cool to see if there's any connections between living in the clouds and the Uka or Oka, however you pronounce it, in Twilight that we see in Twilight Princess that claim they have been around for a long time, like since the beginning of Hyrule. It'd be interesting to see if there's any connection between Skyloft and those people, and maybe some of the technology. We know that. That Link likes to do cliff diving. Okay, we don't really know that, but at the end of the trailer, Link jumps off a cliff. It's presumed it's confirmed there's going to be transportation between Skyloft and the ground below. Who knows what it's going to be? It could just be teleportation. It could be flight. That is still technically a possibility, even though there won't be freeform flight. Like Link's not going to be Superman flying around doing whatever he wants. He's going to have to ride something or teleport on something. So we don't really know that. So there is still a possibility of flight. What else do we know about the game? We know that it uses Wii Motion Plus. There's going to be at least 8 items in the game, most likely more. They said there's going to be more items than what the slots showed at E3. So we know there's going to be a bunch of items. We know that Wii Motion Plus is a big thing. We know there's going to be moments in the game when you're not going to have your sword. It's going to be taken away from you, and I know there's some people that have been annoyed with that. I think it's great. I think taking away the sword adds a whole new element to the game because we've kind of always had the sword. So it's really hard for me to complain about it being taken away if I don't know what that means. Does that mean that we have to use other weapons? I mean, the potential is endless here because we are so reliant on using a sword in all of our games. Always having a sword, whether it's the wood sword, the Kokori sword, the Bigoron sword, the fierce deity mask sword, all that stuff. We're so used to having a sword, obviously the Master Sword, that what's it like without it? The only other time we went in the game without having a sword for a decent period of time was in the Wind Waker, when you're shot out of the cannon and you need to you need to sneak around, sneak up to the top, do some stealth action to discover your sword, only to fight more people with it. You don't actually do very much fighting without physically possessing your sword. So it'd be cool to see if they have some puzzles that directly involve not having your sword. Or they force you to use your other items creatively instead of relying on the sword. And that's what's kind of cool because the big mechanic everyone's talking about, because every game has its gimmick, is that it's going to be the sword combat. Well, when they take away your sword for parts of the game, it's like, ooh, what else do they have? It's not just the one-to-one sword controls. There's also a noted difference finally between the slingshot and the bow. Basically in every single game since the beginning of time, you have the slingshot and you have the bow. As soon as you get the bow, there is no reason to get the slingshot, and usually you get the bow shortly after getting the slingshot, which makes the existence of the slingshot completely pointless. Well, at least in Skyward Sword there's going to be a difference, and the difference is just pure controls. The slingshot is going to be basically just like how you played Link's crossbow trading. You point at the screen, you find a spot, shoot. The bow is kind of more like Wii Sports Resort, except only for right-handed people. There's no left-handed option. So you lift it up like this, and you aim like this, and you let go of a button, and it shoots an arrow. So if you've played Wii Sports Resort, I guess it's similar to that. So there's a difference. So basically, slingshot's the easy way to aim, but does less damage, I assume. And then the bow does more damage, and but you have to aim it differently, which makes aiming more difficult. So that's kind of cool. And the bow can now like stick things to walls, like you saw in the trailer that an arrow went and stuck a heart shot at a heart, and the arrow carried the heart into a wall. So that was kind of cool. So what else do we know about Skyward Sword? We know there's going to be a dash button. This was seen in a lot of gameplay videos. It's kind of refreshing that there is a dash button, because until that existed, it's pretty much almost always been faster to roll around Hyrule. Do the famous Link roll, 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 roll. That used to be the quickest way to actually move without being on a horse. So it's kind of cool they added that dash mechanic, and it looks like he can do some cool stuff with it, like reach ledges that you normally are too high for him, but now because he's running at it, he kind of does like a little run and like a little step on the ledge. Pretty much like if you've ever gone to a gym and just ran at the wall and kind of put a step on the wall and kind of sprung yourself up to see how high you could hit. I don't know, some people that have done that to even slam basketballs down on hoops that are flat against the wall. So if you've ever done that, that's kind of like what happens. So it's actually a realistic mechanic to how things work in real life when we're running and trying to jump really high on a wall. So that's kind of cool. Outside of that, we don't really know a whole lot. We know there's going to be, we know one of the new items is a beetle. It zooms around. You can pick stuff up with it and drop it. Completely controllable. Wii Motion Plus looks kind of fun. It looks like a kind of a new version of a boomerang, essentially, because boomerangs used to be able to pick up items. Well, now you do it with a beetle, but it's got more freedom of control instead of locking onto things. And we also know that you can now roll bombs like a bowling ball. That creates probably some new puzzle ideas. And we also know that this game is supposedly not going to be like any other Zelda before it, and that the distinction between being in the field and being in a dungeon is going to be completely altered. What that means, I don't know. From what they've said, it means that it's not going to be so specific that you enter a door and boom, you're in the forest dungeon. You could just be in the forest and somehow find out that you're actually in a dungeon at some point. Something like that. Something to that effect, I think, is what they're going for. I think they're trying to get rid of the distinction between a dungeon and a forest, or a dungeon and a field, or a dungeon and Hyrule Castle. Kind of throw it all together and make it a giant open world. Because one thing they've also said is that this is going to be the biggest world yet for Zelda. Why shouldn't it be? It's the newest console release. It's also been in development for 5 or 6 years, depending on who you want to believe. And that's a long time. That's the longest any Zelda game has been in development. Don't get confused. Like, Ocarina of Time has always been praised about being the longest, but Ocarina of Time was actually only in development for 4 years. So Skyward Sword has at least been in development 4 years. Most likely it looks like longer than 4 years. So Skyward Sword should be masterful. Hopefully. And obviously it's going to have orchestrated music. Miyamoto kind of confirmed, Mario Galaxy has it. They can't not do it to Zelda, even though they have they didn't do it to Donkey Kong, they didn't do it to Kirby. But again, Zelda's more of one of their upper echelon franchises that's always, just always going to be there. So that's what we know. There might be some stuff I missed, some little minor details, little storyline plot details that I might have missed. But that's kind of it. And I hope you enjoyed this video. I got about 30 seconds left before I have to shut it down. And I just want to say, hey, these are my new glasses. I'm sure there was plenty of glare. You guys have never seen me in glasses too much, I don't think, because I usually take them off. But I'm proud of these. These are Oakley's. I got them as a birthday present from 3 years ago. Just got them now from my parents. It's kind of my fault. But that's it. I hope you guys continue to enjoy ZeldaInformer.com.